I think I'll do it anyway. So my first question, and I read your bio already, but again, Deb is an occupational therapist, over 20 years of practice helping kids with ASD, ADHD, sensory processing disorders, and all that stuff. So I'm going to, yeah, Eric, definitely. It seems like there's forces that don't want us to get together on this. So I want to know, my first question, I think you froze though. Hold on.
Of what their life choices are. So for me, you know, there's no better, just as far as I was concerned, there's no better profession to be able to look at that and examine that and look at outcomes and function in school than an OT, because it's so holistic and it considers all the main players, you know? So that's why I became an OT, is because I wanted to help kids gain access to the education system and then life success and meet their full potential, you know?
Right. And I love that you brought up holistic again, because it is, you have a holistic viewpoint. You look at everything, the whole child, all the way, all the parts, all the senses, which we're going to talk about too, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So my next question is, what are some ways occupational therapists help children with the more developmental disabilities like ASD and then also ADHD? As you know, that's my account, that's my people, that's me.
Right.
So
right, yeah.
Those are the two things I want to talk about in this question, ASD and ADHD, and how do you help?
So I think the most powerful thing that OTs do is a comprehensive, like fundamental neurodevelopmental assessment. So when we're looking at that person piece, we're looking at the child from like early, like developmental phases that are happening like in gestation. So we're testing things like that after they're born and looking at our sensory system and moving all the way up through development to assess that higher area of learning. So I think one of the biggest ways and the most value that comes from OT is that evaluation, so that then we can make targeted treatment plans to help kids meet their full potential or gain access to whatever it is that they you know need to learn, or areas or skills that they need to build. So that's one way that we help, is through evaluation. And then just the perspective of like sensory in itself. When you look at sensory, so many OTs work in sensory, and it's a major part of our evaluation, and it is, you know, it's the foundation for all higher learning, which we're going to be talking about when we're looking at the model, the learning pyramid that you just showed earlier. But when you take that perspective, you're able to identify where the first points of breakdown are in that massive model, so that you can go in and address those issues and improve processing or support processing in areas of the brain that may be overlooked if you took a top-down approach to providing treatment. So it's really rooted in the foundations of development and sensory processing. So,
right. And I feel like we're leading right into the triangle, the pyramid, because the basics. Because when I think as a teacher, and we were talking about this a little bit the first time we did this interview, we only can look at academic learning, and then our data points are like, can they pay attention, and then grades are it.
Right.
So if you don't have academic success, if you're not able to access academic learning at all, I don't have the tools to go down deep and dig. But that's where you come in. So what are your, like, tell me about the sensory pyramid, like
I will.
Looking at these things.
So then when you think about what I just told you to begin with too, and looking at those three components, so not only then can we develop treatment plans to build skills, and a lot of OTs are very, very experienced in protocols and activities to improve processing in areas of the brain, and treatment plans that are associated, like sensory processing interventions, sensory integration, so on and so forth. So not only can we do that, but then we have a better idea of what needs to have accommodations, like what aspects of development need to be accommodated, right? So what supports can we put in to support the child in the learning environment, in life, at home, in the community, wherever it may be. And then we can task analyze and identify how we can change the activity in order to fit within that model best. So it's a very holistic treatment plan that is comprehensive.
Can we do like one example to go through the steps? Because I just feel like I kind of know what you mean, but I'd love to hear, like, do you mind being that specific?
No, not at all.
Cool.
Okay, so let's talk about the model. Can I just bring up the model, like the stages of, so I have it here beside me because I knew we were going to be talking about it. So when you look at development that start like in utero, right? We're building our central nervous system. And then from there, all of the senses start to develop. So there's 8 senses.
Yeah.
So there's all of the senses that we're familiar with. And then there's our vestibular sense, which gives us an understanding of our body and where we are in space, and plays a massive, massive role being able to be regulated and focused and concentrate. Okay. There's also the proprioceptive system, which gives you information from your muscles and your joints. And it gives you, it helps a lot with regulation in terms of calming as well. And some of those neurobaths that that we're trying to facilitate for our children to facilitate calmness and concentration. And then there's the interoceptive system, which a lot of people aren't familiar with. And that is our awareness of what's going on inside of us in terms of like thirst and hunger and needing to use the bathroom, and the feelings and emotions that are linked to those systems as we experience those. Okay. So that's the first layer, each one of those senses and how they start coming together and talking together and integrating to build development, to build our brain.
Right. And so in that first one, and I'm going to ask like a little personal question. I know that like, because kids have problems, a lot of ADHD kids, I know this, have problems with the bedwetting. Isn't that
right?
The last system?
Sometimes it is. That's why it's important to get a comprehensive evaluation. Right. Sometimes there's actually primitive reflexes, which are reflexes. Do you know primitive reflexes?
Well,
there's a reflex.
Yeah.
Pardon?
My friend's a cranial sacral therapist, so she's been working with my son. But if we like get that working again, because it's not connected, that's why he's still having problems.
So there's reflex, for people who don't know what primitive reflexes are, there's reflexes that we have that serve a purpose in development to help us help push us through. And in this case, for this conversation, we're using the pyramid model to help us push us through the beginning stages of development. So one of your earlier reflexes are, we'll start with like the Moro reflex, and it helps hit a certain set of milestones. It's a startle reflex that you have, and it helps you develop muscle control, head control, and it also has a fight or flight component associated with it. That will integrate, and then the next reflex will come in. And these reflexes support things like rolling and crawling and walking and whatnot. So what happens sometimes is that our reflexes aren't integrated, and it affects with that fundamental process of development, which is a foundation, as we talk about the pyramid, for higher level learnings that are at the tip, like academic success, confidence, self-esteem, daily living activities, behavior, being able to manage your behavior, have self-control. All of these things require those foundational pieces. So but back to the bedwetting. Sorry, I got a little bit off. There's a reflex called the Gallant reflex, and some kids who have that is not integrated, and it can be triggered, and it can actually cause bedwetting in kids who have. So whenever I get a kid that is still bedwetting and the family has tried everything, I'll test their Gallant reflex and see if it's still present. Oh, really? Yeah. And see if it's still present, and then integrate that reflex. Did you have that reflex and needed to get it integrated? Or is
no, he needs to get it integrated. My middle one needs to get it integrated. We've done alarms, we've done everything, and he just turned 8, so he's really embarrassed about it. So yeah.
Oh, bless his heart. Yeah, there are some really great protocols and activities that are available. We can talk about that.
Yeah, we should.
Or even finding somebody local. Like I can guide you with some questions in terms of how to find somebody locally that would be like what questions you should ask if you're looking for therapists, people
Right.
who would be versed in that type of treatment.
I think we could do 100 interviews, Deb. I'm serious.
I know.
Because I have so many clients that have issues with bedwetting, and that becomes ADHD, sensory processing. I mean, there's just so many things that you can help with. I think people don't realize. I just realized that the screen is completely black.
For me?
You. Are you? Can you?
I can see you.
You can see me. Can you switch your screen at all? Maybe everybody else can see you and I just can't. So that's fine. I just wanted to make sure. Can anybody who's on? Can you guys
see it? If you can see both of us.
Let's see if anybody.
Just adding something in the comments.
And my app might not be updating or something, so maybe that's why. Oh, hey, Arcline just come on. It looks like the comments, you can see us both.
They can see us both. That's fabulous. Okay, great. I don't know why we're having so much problem with it. It's so funny.
I don't know.
I know.
And you were taking us through the pyramid. I didn't mean to take it over, but of course I was like, my ears perked up. I'm like, wait, I'm working on that.
Oh no, that's fabulous. It's easier that way when we're having like an exchange of conversation, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so when you look at so the first layer or the foundational components are the senses, right? And then they integrate, start working together, and we're responding to things, and we're developing responses to how we receive, process that information. Okay, and those responses become building blocks for other activities and brain development.